Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Liberty Dawn, watching the stars blur past through the main screen. His ship was humanity's newest exploration vessel, equipped with the most advanced faster-than-light drive ever built. The crew of 200 had been testing the new engine for 3 months, pushing deeper into space than any human had gone before. "Captain, we're getting some strange readings from the solar sensors," called out Lisa Parker from her navigation station. She was young, only 26, but one of the best navigators in the Earth fleet. Her fingers danced across the control panel as she studied the incoming data. Morrison walked over to her station. "What kind of readings?" "Solar flare activity is increasing rapidly in this system. The radiation levels are climbing fast." Lisa's voice carried a note of concern. "If we don't move soon, our shields won't protect us." The captain looked at the main screen where the local star was beginning to show bright spots of activity. Solar flares were dangerous to any spacecraft, but especially to ships testing new technology. "How long do we have?" "Maybe 10 minutes, before the radiation becomes too strong," Lisa replied, her hands moving quickly over the controls. "I can plot a jump to the next system, but the new drive hasn't been tested under emergency conditions." Commander Ryan Brooks, the ship's tactical officer, joined them at the navigation station. He was a big man with gray hair and steady eyes. "Captain, we should jump now. Better to risk the untested drive than get caught in a solar storm." Morrison nodded. "Do it. Get us out of here." Lisa's fingers flew over the controls as she entered the jump coordinates. The new drive system hummed to life, creating a strange vibration throughout the ship. "Jump in 30 seconds, she announced over the ship's communication system. The solar flare erupted just as Lisa activated the jump drive. The massive burst of radiation hit the Liberty Dawn at the same moment the ship entered hyperspace. Combination of solar energy and experimental technology created something no one had expected. Instead of jumping to the nearby system Lisa had programmed, the ship was thrown across space like a stone from a slingshot. The crew felt the ship shake violently as it traveled much farther than planned. Emergency lights flashed on the bridge as systems struggled to handle the unexpected journey. When the ship finally dropped out of hyperspace, everyone on the bridge stared at the main screen in shock. They were surrounded by stars that no human had ever seen before. The familiar constellations of Earth's local space were nowhere to be found. "Where are we?" Morrison asked, though he suspected the answer would not be good. Lisa checked her instruments with shaking hands. "I don't know, sir. The star patterns don't match anything in our database. We're not just far from home, we're very far from home." Before anyone could respond, the ship's alarm system began blaring. Pete Williams, the chief engineer, called from the engine room. "Captain, we've got company, big company." The main screen changed to show what was ahead of them. Dozens of alien ships surrounded the Liberty Dawn. They were unlike anything humans had ever imagined, long and curved like sea creatures, with surfaces that seemed to shimmer in the starlight. The smallest of these ships was twice the size of the Liberty Dawn. "They're scanning us," reported Kate Johnson from her communication station. She was trying to make sense of the energy readings. "The scans are incredibly detailed. They're learning everything about our ship." A new voice joined the conversation from the bridge's science station. Dr. Dan Carter, the chief science officer, was studying the alien vessels with fascination and fear. "Captain, their technology is far more advanced than ours. Those ships could destroy us without effort." Morrison felt the weight of command on his shoulders. His crew was 50,000 light-years from Earth, surrounded by alien ships with superior technology. Every decision he made now could mean the difference between life and death for 200 people. "Try to establish communication," he ordered Kate. "Use the universal mathematical signals we prepared for first contact." Kate began transmitting basic mathematical sequences, prime numbers, geometric shapes, and simple equations. For several minutes, there was no response. Then the alien ships began moving into a new formation around the Liberty Dawn. One of the largest alien vessels moved closer. It was beautiful in a strange way, covered in flowing patterns that seemed to move across its surface like living things. The ship was easily 10 times larger than the Liberty Dawn. "Incoming transmission," Kate announced. "It's not in any language we know, but there are mathematical elements in the signal. I think they're trying to talk to us." The main screen flickered and then showed the image of an alien being. It had blue-gray skin, large eyes, and a face that was almost human but clearly from another world. When it spoke, the words were translated by the ship's computer into basic English. "Unknown vessel, you have entered the territory of the Zephyrian Empire. State your origin and purpose." Morrison stepped forward, knowing this moment would be remembered in human history. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Liberty Dawn. We are explorers from a distant world. We came here by accident and mean no harm." The alien studied Morrison through the screen. "I am Admiral Kethran of the Imperial Fleet. Your ship design is unknown to us. Your technology does not match any recorded civilization. Where is this Earth you speak of?" "Very far from here," Morrison replied carefully. "We had an accident with our navigation system. We're trying to find our way home." Admiral Kethran's expression was hard to read, but Morrison sensed the alien was making an important decision. The Liberty Dawn remained surrounded by the alien fleet, completely at their mercy. "You will accompany us to the fleet command station," the Admiral finally said. "There we will decide what to do with you. Do not attempt to leave or you will be destroyed." The communication ended, leaving the bridge of the Liberty Dawn in tense silence. Morrison looked at his crew, seeing fear and determination in their faces. They were no longer explorers on a peaceful mission. They were representatives of humanity, trapped in an alien empire that could end their lives with a single order. "Set course to follow them," Morrison told Lisa, "and send a message to all departments. We're no longer in friendly space. Everyone stays alert and ready for anything." As the Liberty Dawn began following the alien fleet, Morrison wondered if they would ever see Earth again. The Zephyrian Empire was vast and powerful, and humans were just an unknown species that had stumbled into their territory. Whatever happened next would determine not just the fate of his crew but possibly the future relationship between humanity and the galaxy. The Liberty Dawn followed the alien fleet for 2 days before reaching their destination. Captain Morrison had used the time to learn what he could about their captors, through careful observation and polite questions during brief communications with Admiral Kethran. The Zephyrian Empire was ancient and vast, controlling thousands of star systems. They had been fighting a war against an enemy called the Vex Collective for over a century. The conflict had reached a deadly stalemate, with neither side able to gain a lasting advantage. When they arrived at the fleet command station, Morrison was amazed by its size. The station was like a small city floating in space with docking bays large enough to hold hundreds of ships. The Liberty Dawn looked tiny as it was guided to a parking spot among the alien vessels. Admiral Kethran came aboard the human ship with a small group of his officers. The aliens were taller than humans, with long limbs and graceful movements. They studied everything with curious eyes, clearly fascinated by human technology and design. "Your ship is very different from ours," the Admiral said as Morrison gave him a tour of the bridge. "The systems are simpler, but they seem very effective. How fast can your vessel travel?" Morrison was careful with his answers. He didn't want to reveal too much about human capabilities, but he also needed to maintain the aliens' interest in keeping them alive. "Fast enough to cross our local space in reasonable time," he said diplomatically. Dr. Dan Carter joined the conversation, his scientific curiosity overcoming his caution. "Admiral, we're very interested in learning about your empire and your technology. Perhaps we could arrange some kind of exchange of information." The Admiral's large eyes studied Carter carefully. "Information exchange can be valuable, but first, I must understand your true capabilities. Your ship's design suggests you think differently about space travel than we do. This interests me because my fleet has suffered many defeats recently." Commander Ryan Brooks stepped forward. As the ship's tactical officer, he had been analyzing what he could see of Zephyrian military operations. "Defeats against the Vex Collective?" "Yes," Admiral Kethran replied, his voice heavy with frustration. We have superior technology and more ships, but somehow we keep losing battles. Our tactics are proven over centuries of warfare, yet they fail against these insects. Morrison saw an opportunity. Perhaps we could observe one of your operations. As outsiders, we might notice things that you've become too familiar with to see clearly. The Admiral considered this suggestion. It was clear he was desperate for any advantage in the war. After a long moment, he nodded. Very well. Tomorrow we attack an enemy position at Nexus Station. You may observe from the bridge of my flagship, the Eternal Storm, but you will not interfere unless I specifically request your input. That evening, Morrison gathered his senior officers in the Liberty Dawn's conference room. Amy Rodriguez, the ship's diplomat, had been studying Zephyrian culture and language. Kate Johnson had been analyzing their communication methods. Pete Williams had been examining their engineering approaches. What have you learned? Morrison asked his team. Amy spoke first. The Zephyrians have a rigid social structure based on honor and tradition. They've been the dominant power in this region for centuries, and they're not used to losing. The current war is testing their confidence in their own superiority. Kate added, their military communications are very formal and hierarchical. Orders flow down from the top, but there's very little feedback going back up. Lower-ranking officers seem afraid to suggest changes or report problems. Pete had been studying their ship designs and weapons. Their technology is definitely more advanced than ours, but their approach is very different. They prefer massive, overwhelming force rather than efficiency or flexibility. Their ships are powerful but not very maneuverable. Ryan had been thinking about military tactics. From what I've observed, they fight like armies from Earth's ancient history. Rigid formations, predictable strategies, and a preference for direct confrontation. It's like they never developed more sophisticated approaches to warfare. Morrison felt a growing understanding of the situation. So they have better technology, but we might have better tactics? It's possible, Ryan replied. But we need to be very careful. We don't want to get involved in their war, but we also need their cooperation to get home. The next morning, Morrison and his officers were taken to the Eternal Storm, Admiral Kethran's flagship. The alien ship was magnificent, with curved corridors and organic-looking control systems. The bridge was enormous, with dozens of officers working at stations arranged in perfect geometric patterns. The human officers were given a special observation area where they could watch the battle without interfering. As the fleet approached Nexus Station, Morrison got his first look at the enemy. The Vex collective ships were completely different from Zephyrian vessels. They looked like geometric crystals, all sharp angles and flat surfaces. They moved in tight formations that reminded Morrison of insect swarms from Earth. Beginning attack formation, Admiral Kethran announced to his fleet. The Zephyrian ships arranged themselves in long lines preparing for a direct assault on the enemy positions around the station. Ryan watched the formation with growing concern. He leaned over to Morrison and whispered, "They're going to attack straight into the enemy's strongest defenses. It's like charging cavalry against machine guns." The battle began with a massive exchange of energy weapons. The space around Nexus Station filled with bright flashes as both fleets fired everything they had. The Zephyrian ships advanced steadily, their powerful shields absorbing enemy fire while they returned devastating volleys. But the Vex Collective had prepared their defenses well. As the Zephyrian fleet advanced, hidden enemy ships appeared from behind asteroids and debris. The attack formation that had looked so impressive suddenly became a trap, with Zephyrian ships caught in crossfire from multiple directions. Morrison watched in horror as several of the graceful alien ships exploded under concentrated enemy fire. The Admiral was shouting orders, trying to reorganize his scattered fleet, but the damage was done. The attack had failed, and the Zephyrians were forced to retreat. As the surviving ships regrouped at a safe distance, Admiral Kethran slumped in his command chair. Morrison could see the defeat weighing heavily on the alien commander. This was clearly not the first time such a battle had ended in failure. "Casualties?" the Admiral asked his communications officer. 17 ships destroyed, 23 damaged. Estimated crew losses over 4,000, came the grim reply. The bridge fell silent. Morrison felt terrible for the aliens who had died, but he also saw something that troubled him even more. The Zephyrian officers didn't seem surprised by the defeat. They had expected to lose, even before the battle began. After the fleet returned to the command station, Admiral Kethrin approached Morrison privately. The alien commander's dignity remained intact, but Morrison could see the desperation in his large eyes. "Captain Morrison," the admiral said quietly, "you observed our operation today. As an outsider, did you notice anything that might explain our difficulties?" Morrison realized this was the moment that would determine everything. He could stay neutral and hope to eventually find his way home, or he could risk getting involved in an alien war by sharing what he had observed. He thought about the thousands of beings who had died that day, and the thousands more who would die if the war continued. He thought about his crew, depending on him to make the right choice. Finally, he made his decision. "Yes, Admiral," Morrison said carefully. "I think I might have some observations that could be useful." Captain Morrison sat in Admiral Kethrin's private quarters aboard the Eternal Storm. The alien commander had requested this meeting away from his own officers, and Morrison understood why. No military leader wanted to admit failure in front of their troops. The admiral's quarters were elegant, decorated with flowing artwork and symbols of Zephyrian military achievement. But Morrison could see the weight of recent defeats in the alien's posture and expression. "Captain, please speak freely," Admiral Kethrin said. "What did you observe during our attack that I might have missed?" Morrison chose his words carefully. "Admiral, your ships are magnificent and your weapons are powerful. Your crews are brave and disciplined, but your battle tactics are very predictable." The admiral's eyes narrowed slightly. "Predictable? Our formations have been perfected over centuries of warfare. They have brought victory to the Empire in countless conflicts." "Against enemies who fought the same way you do," Morrison replied gently. "The Vex Collective seems to fight differently. They don't meet your formations head-on. Instead, they use your predictability against you." Ryan Brooks had joined the meeting at Morrison's request. The tactical officer pulled out a small tablet and began sketching the battle they had witnessed. "Admiral, your ships attacked in straight lines toward the enemy's strongest position. The Vex knew exactly where you were going and prepared accordingly." Kethrin studied the simple diagram Ryan had drawn. "What would you suggest instead?" Morrison looked at Ryan, who nodded and continued. "On Earth, we learned long ago that direct attacks against prepared positions usually fail. Instead, we use maneuvers to confuse the enemy and attack from unexpected directions." "Explain these maneuvers," the admiral said, leaning forward with interest. Ryan began drawing new diagrams. "For example, you could split your fleet into multiple groups. Send one group to attack the enemy's main position, but have it retreat quickly. While the enemy focuses on that group, send another group around to attack from a different angle." The alien commander studied the diagrams with fascination. "This is deception? You would trick the enemy about your true intentions?" "Exactly," Morrison said. "The goal isn't to overpower the enemy with brute force. It's to make them make mistakes by not knowing what you're really planning to do." Admiral Kethrin was quiet for a long time, clearly thinking about these new ideas. Finally, he spoke. "Captain, would you be willing to observe more of our operations? Perhaps your different perspective could help us understand our failures better." Morrison felt the weight of the decision. Getting involved in the alien war went against every first contact protocol, but his crew needed the admiral's cooperation to survive and eventually get home. "We're willing to help, but only as advisors. We won't directly participate in combat." "Understood," the admiral replied. "I have a small operation planned for next week, a raid on a Vex supply depot. Perhaps you could suggest how to make it more unpredictable." Over the following days, Morrison's crew worked with Zephyrian officers to plan the new attack. Dr. Dan Carter studied Vex ship designs and movement patterns. Kate Johnson analyzed enemy communication methods. Pete Williams examined Zephyrian fighter craft to understand their capabilities better. The breakthrough came when Alex Turner, the Liberty Dawn's test pilot, was allowed to fly one of the alien fighters. Turner was known for his unconventional flying style, and the Zephyrian pilots were amazed by his maneuvers. "How do you make the ship do that?" asked Commander Velkaran, one of the Admiral's most experienced pilots. Turner had just performed a complex spiral approach that no Zephyrian had ever attempted. "I don't fight the ship," Turner explained through the translation system. "I work with it. Instead of flying in straight lines, I use the ship's natural movement to confuse enemy targeting systems." Commander Velkaran tried to copy Turner's movements, but the Zephyrian's training made it difficult. "Our pilots are taught precision formation flying. What you do seems chaotic." "It's controlled chaos," Turner replied with a grin. "The enemy can't hit what they can't predict." Meanwhile, Maria Gonzalez, the Liberty Dawn's intelligence analyst, was reviewing recordings of previous Vex battles. She noticed patterns that the Zephyrians had missed because they were too focused on their own tactics. "The Vex always respond the same way to direct attacks," she explained to Admiral Kethran. "They gather their forces at the point of attack and then surround the attacking fleet. But they take time to reposition their ships. If you attack quickly and then retreat before they can surround you, you can hit them multiple times without getting trapped." Dr. Helen Price, the ship's medical officer, made another important observation. "Admiral, your fleet formations are beautiful, but they don't allow for quick changes. When something goes wrong, it takes too long for your ships to adapt." The Admiral was beginning to understand. "So you suggest smaller, more flexible groups instead of large formations?" "Exactly," Morrison confirmed. "Small groups can change direction quickly. If one group gets in trouble, the others can help without exposing the entire fleet to danger." When the day of the supply depot raid arrived, the Zephyrian fleet looked very different from before. Instead of one massive formation, Admiral Kethran had divided his ships into 6 smaller groups. Each group had a specific mission and the freedom to adapt if circumstances changed. The human officers watched from the eternal storm as the plan unfolded. The first group approached the depot from the expected direction, drawing the attention of the Vex defenders. When the enemy ships moved to intercept, 2 other groups attacked from different angles simultaneously. The Vex collective defenders were confused by the multiple attacks. Their formations, designed to counter single large assaults, couldn't adapt quickly enough to face threats from 3 directions at once. Within minutes, the depot's defenses were overwhelmed. But the most impressive part came when Vex reinforcements arrived. In previous battles, the Zephyrian fleet would have stayed to fight, often becoming trapped and destroyed. This time, Admiral Kethran followed the human advice and ordered a quick withdrawal before the enemy could surround his forces. The raid was a complete success. The supply depot was destroyed with minimal Zephyrian casualties, and the fleet escaped before enemy reinforcements could engage them effectively. On the bridge of the Eternal Storm, the alien crew was celebrating their first real victory in months. Admiral Kethran approached Morrison with something that might have been a smile on his alien features. "Captain, your advice has given us hope," the Admiral said. "For the first time in years, we have proof that the Vex Collective can be defeated. My officers are eager to learn more of these human tactics." Morrison felt a mixture of pride and worry. The victory was satisfying, but he knew it would lead to greater involvement in the alien war. "Admiral, we're happy to help, but remember that we're explorers, not warriors. Our goal is still to find our way home." "Of course," Admiral Kethran replied. "But perhaps helping us end this war more quickly is the best way to ensure your safe return to your own people." As news of the victory spread through the Zephyrian fleet, Morrison realized that there was no going back. The humans had proven that their different way of thinking could change the course of an interstellar war. Whether they wanted to or not, they were now key players in a conflict that had been raging for over a century. The question now was whether human tactical knowledge would be enough to end the war, or if it would simply make the fighting more deadly for both sides. Word of the successful raid spread throughout the Zephyrian Empire faster than Admiral Kethran had expected. Within days, reports reached the capital world of Zephyros Prime and the palace of Emperor Zarthul himself. Captain Morrison had hoped to remain quietly in the background, but that was no longer possible. The message came directly from the Emperor's court. Morrison was to present himself at the Imperial Palace to explain these new human tactical methods. The invitation was polite, but everyone understood it was actually a command. Morrison found himself aboard a luxury transport ship, traveling to the heart of the Zephyrian Empire. The journey took 3 days, during which he was treated like an honored guest rather than a stranded explorer. The ship's captain, a dignified alien named Commander Jethral, spoke excellent English and served as Morrison's guide to Zephyrian culture. "The Emperor is very interested in meeting you," Commander Jethral explained as they approached Zephyros Prime. "Your tactical methods have impressed many in the military hierarchy, but they have also created controversy." "What kind of controversy?" Morrison asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Some of our generals believe that traditional Zephyrian military doctrine is superior to any alien approach. They view the recent victory as fortunate accident rather than proof of tactical superiority. Others are more open to new ideas, especially given our recent string of defeats." When Morrison saw Zephyros Prime through the transport's viewports, he was amazed by its beauty. The planet was covered with gleaming cities connected by bridges that spanned entire continents. The architecture was organic and flowing, like the Zephyrian ships but on a planetary scale. The Emperor's palace was located on a floating island above the main city. As Morrison's shuttle approached the landing platform, he could see gardens and fountains that seemed to defy gravity. The technology required to maintain such a structure was beyond human understanding. Emperor Zarthul was older than Admiral Kethran, with silver markings on his blue-gray skin that indicated advanced age and wisdom. He received Morrison in a vast hall decorated with holographic displays showing the history of Zephyrian military victories. The message was clear. This was a civilization that took great pride in its martial traditions. "Captain Morrison of Earth," the Emperor said in perfect English, "we are honored to receive the first representative of your people. Admiral Kethran speaks highly of your tactical insights." Morrison bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty, I'm honored by your invitation. I want to emphasize that my crew and I are explorers, not military advisors. We're grateful for your hospitality while we search for a way home." The Emperor's large eyes studied Morrison carefully. "Yet your advice has achieved what our generals could not accomplish in months of fighting. Perhaps exploration and warfare require similar skills, the ability to adapt to unknown situations." Before Morrison could respond, another voice interrupted the conversation. "Your Majesty, with respect, I believe we should be cautious about placing too much faith in primitive alien tactics." Morrison turned to see a tall Zephyrian in elaborate military dress approaching them. This was clearly a high-ranking officer, and his tone suggested he was not impressed with human achievements. "Captain Morrison, allow me to present Lord Commander Veltar, Supreme General of the Southern Fleet," the Emperor said diplomatically. "He has some concerns about recent tactical changes in our military approach." Lord Commander Veltar looked down at Morrison with barely concealed disdain. "Captain, your people's ship is small and lightly armed. Your technology is crude compared to ours. What makes you think you can teach the Zephyrian Empire about warfare?" Morrison felt the tension in the room. This was clearly a test, and his answer would determine how the Empire viewed humanity's contribution to their war effort. "Lord Commander, you're absolutely right about our technology. Our ships are smaller, and our weapons are less advanced. That's exactly why we had to learn different ways of fighting." "Explain," Veltar demanded. "When you have superior technology, you can afford to fight directly. When you don't, you have to fight smarter. Human military history is full of smaller, weaker forces defeating larger, stronger ones through superior tactics and strategy." The Emperor leaned forward with interest. "Give us an example." Morrison thought quickly, choosing a historical example that would translate well to space warfare. "On Earth, there was once a battle where a small force of 300 warriors held off an army of hundreds of thousands. They couldn't win through direct confrontation, so they chose a position where the enemy's numbers became a disadvantage, rather than an advantage." Lord Commander Veltar scoffed. "Primitive ground combat has no relevance to modern space warfare. The principles are the same. Morrison replied calmly. Superior numbers and technology don't guarantee victory if they're used predictably. The Vex Collective has learned to counter your traditional tactics because they've seen them used the same way for decades. The Emperor raised a hand to prevent further argument. Captain Morrison, I would like you to work with our military academy to develop new training programs. We will test these human tactical concepts more thoroughly. Over the following weeks, Morrison found himself at the center of a revolution in Zephyrian military thinking. Working with progressive officers like Admiral Kethran, he helped establish new training protocols that emphasized flexibility and adaptation over rigid formation flying. Tony Walsh, the Liberty Dawn's chief engineer, was brought to the capital to work with Zephyrian scientists on adapting human engineering principles to their technology. His focus on efficiency and modular design impressed the aliens, who had always prioritized raw power over versatility. Dr. Carol White, the ship's linguist, made an important discovery while studying Zephyrian military terminology. The alien language had very few words for tactical concepts like feint, misdirection, or strategic retreat. The vocabulary itself limited how Zephyrian officers could think about warfare. It's like trying to describe color to someone who only has words for black and white, she explained to Morrison. Their language shapes their military thinking, and their military thinking has become trapped by their language. Commander Susan Lee worked with Zephyrian junior officers to develop new communication protocols. Instead of rigid chains of command, where orders flowed only downward, she introduced concepts of battlefield initiative and adaptive leadership. But the most significant development came when human-trained Zephyrian units began achieving consistent victories against Vex Collective forces. Small raids became major offensives. Supply line disruptions became strategic campaigns. For the first time in decades, the Empire was winning the war. However, success brought new complications. The Vex Collective began adapting their own tactics to counter human-inspired strategies. Enemy formations became more flexible. Vex ships started using deception and misdirection. The war was escalating in both complexity and intensity. Morrison received troubling reports from Dr. Rachel Green, the Liberty Dawn's psychologist, who had been observing how the crew was handling their extended stay in alien space. Some of the younger crew members, particularly Lieutenant Ben Cooper, were becoming too emotionally invested in the Zephyrian cause. Captain, some of our people are starting to see themselves as saviors of the Empire rather than temporary advisors, she warned during a private meeting. They're losing sight of our primary mission, which is to get home. Morrison knew she was right. The crew had been away from Earth for months now, living among aliens and helping fight an interstellar war. It was easy to forget that they were supposed to be explorers, not conquerors. The situation became more complicated when Emperor Zarthul made an unprecedented offer. He invited Morrison to a private audience where he presented a proposal that would change everything. Captain Morrison, your people have given the Empire hope for the first time in generations. I would like to offer formal alliance between our civilizations. Humans would be granted full citizenship in the Empire, with territorial rights and military commands. Morrison felt the weight of the offer. It was tempting. His crew would have secure positions and comfortable lives, but it would also mean abandoning Earth and humanity's independent development. Your Majesty, I'm honored by your offer, but I need time to discuss this with my crew. This isn't a decision I can make alone. Of course, the Emperor replied, but consider this, the war is far from over. The Vex Collective is adapting to our new tactics. We may need human strategic thinking more than ever in the battles to come. As Morrison returned to his quarters that night, he realized that the simple exploration mission had become something much more complex. His crew was no longer just trying to get home. They were helping to reshape the balance of power in an entire region of the galaxy. The question now was whether they could win the war and still remain true to their human identity, or whether success would transform them into something else entirely. The emergency alert reached Morrison at dawn, Zephyrian time. Admiral Kethran's face appeared on the communication screen in his quarters, and Morrison could see the fear in the alien's large eyes. Captain, we need you at the command center immediately. Long-range scouts report the largest Vex collective fleet ever assembled heading toward our core worlds. This isn't another raid or border skirmish. They're trying to end the war with one massive strike. Morrison dressed quickly and hurried to the command center, where he found chaos. Zephyrian officers were receiving reports from across the Empire as the scope of the enemy offensive became clear. The Vex collective had gathered nearly 5,000 ships from every sector, creating an armada that dwarfed anything seen before in the century-long war. Emperor Zarthul arrived within the hour, his usual calm demeanor replaced by urgent concern. Captain Morrison, our military advisors estimate the enemy fleet will reach Zephyros Prime in 7 days. Every defensive force we can gather will only amount to 3,000 ships. The odds are not in our favor. Morrison studied the tactical displays showing the approaching enemy armada. The Vex formation was impressive, a vast swarm of crystal-like ships arranged in multiple layers of geometric precision. But as he watched the movement patterns, he began to see weaknesses. "Your Majesty, I need complete authority to coordinate the defense," Morrison said. "The traditional command structure won't be flexible enough for what we need to do." The Emperor looked around the room at his military leaders. Several, including Lord Commander Veltar, looked uncomfortable with the idea of an alien directing Zephyrian forces, but the approaching threat left little choice. "Granted," Emperor Zarthul declared. "Captain Morrison, you have supreme command of all Imperial forces for the duration of this crisis." The next 6 days passed in a blur of activity. Morrison's crew worked around the clock to coordinate the most complex military operation in Zephyrian history. Steve Martinez handled the massive logistical challenge of positioning fleets across 7 star systems. Nina Foster established new communication networks that allowed real-time coordination across interstellar distances. The plan Morrison developed was unlike anything the Empire had attempted before. Instead of gathering all ships for one massive defensive battle, he divided the Imperial fleet into multiple task forces scattered throughout the region. Each force had specific objectives and the authority to act independently. Lieutenant Kevin Clark, despite his youth, found himself directing alien squadrons in practice maneuvers. His fresh perspective and lack of preconceived notions about Zephyrian military doctrine made him particularly effective at implementing unconventional tactics. Frank Robinson, the Liberty Dawn's senior enlisted man, worked with Zephyrian ground forces to prepare planetary defenses. His experience with combined arms tactics proved invaluable, as they planned for the possibility of enemy landings on Imperial worlds. As the Vex Armada approached, Morrison faced the most difficult decision of his career. Long-range sensors had detected an even larger enemy fleet following behind the main attack force. Victory against the first wave would be meaningless if they couldn't handle the second. The climactic battle began when the Vex collective entered the outer Imperial systems. Instead of meeting them with a traditional defensive formation, Morrison had positioned his forces to attack the enemy fleet from multiple directions as it moved toward the core worlds. The first engagement took place near the mining world of Kepler 7th. Admiral Kethron led a task force in what appeared to be a desperate attempt to stop the Vex advance. The enemy responded predictably, concentrating their forces to overwhelm the apparently isolated Imperial ships. But as the Vex moved to surround Kethron's fleet, 2 other Imperial task forces attacked from different angles. The enemy formation, designed for overwhelming frontal assaults, couldn't adapt quickly enough to the multi-directional threat. The pattern repeated itself across 3 star systems as Morrison's forces used hit-and-run tactics to disrupt the enemy advance. Each engagement weakened the Vex Armada while preserving Imperial strength for the final confrontation. The decisive moment came when the damaged Vex fleet reached the Zephyros system, expecting to find the remaining Imperial forces gathered for a last desperate defense. Instead, they found what appeared to be a lightly defended capital world. Lord Commander Veltar, despite his earlier opposition to human tactics, had volunteered to command the apparent defense force. His ships were positioned in traditional Zephyrian formations, making them look like easy targets for the approaching enemy. The Vex collective took the bait. Their remaining ships moved into attack formation, concentrating their forces for what they believed would be the final battle of the war. But they had fallen into Morrison's trap. As the enemy fleet committed, To its attack on Veltar's force, Morrison activated the second phase of his plan. Hidden Imperial task forces emerged from behind moons and asteroids throughout the system. The Vex suddenly found themselves surrounded by enemies attacking from every direction simultaneously. The battle lasted 18 hours. Morrison coordinated the Imperial forces from the Eternal Storm, using the communication networks Nina Foster had established to direct the complex multi-fleet operation. Each task force knew its role and adapted to changing conditions without waiting for orders from Central Command. The young Lieutenant Ben Cooper, working alongside experienced Zephyrian tactical officers, helped coordinate fighter squadron operations across the entire battlefield. His enthusiasm and fresh ideas proved crucial when unexpected opportunities arose during the fighting. When the shooting finally stopped, the Vex collective armada had been completely destroyed. More importantly, the follow-up enemy fleet, arriving to find only debris and Imperial forces prepared for their arrival, chose to retreat rather than face the same fate. Emperor Zarthul surveyed the battlefield from his command ship, watching as recovery teams searched for survivors among the wreckage of both fleets. The victory was complete, but it had come at a high cost in lives and resources for both sides. "Captain Morrison," the Emperor said as they stood together on the bridge, "you have given the Empire its greatest victory in over a century. The war may finally be ending." Morrison felt exhausted, but satisfied. The battle had proven that human, tactical principles could work on an interstellar scale. But he also felt the weight of all the lives that had been lost, both Zephyrian and Vex, to achieve this victory. 3 weeks after the battle, as peace negotiations began with the surviving Vex collective leadership, Emperor Zarthul renewed his offer to Morrison and his crew. The Empire would welcome humanity as full partners in governing their vast civilization. Morrison gathered his senior officers in the Liberty Dawn's conference room for the final time. They had been away from Earth for nearly a year, and the ship that had accidentally stumbled into alien space now carried the knowledge and experience that could reshape human civilization. "The Emperor's offer is generous," Morrison told his crew. "Anyone who wants to stay will have my blessing and a position of honor in the Empire." Some of the crew, particularly the younger officers who had found purpose in the interstellar conflict, chose to remain as the first human ambassadors to the Zephyrian Empire, but most, including Morrison, decided that their duty was to return to Earth and share what they had learned. Admiral Kethrin, now promoted to Supreme Military Commander, helped prepare the Liberty Dawn for its journey home. The ship had been upgraded with Zephyrian technology that would make the return trip faster and safer than the accidental journey that had brought them there. "Captain, you have changed more than just our military tactics," Kethrin said during their farewell meeting. "You have shown us that there are always new ways to approach old problems. This lesson will serve the Empire well in the years of peace ahead." As the Liberty Dawn began its journey back to Earth, Morrison stood on the bridge watching the stars of Zephyrian space fade behind them. They were returning home with knowledge that would revolutionize human military thinking and proof that humanity could hold its own among the stars. The ship carried detailed records of advanced alien technology, diplomatic protocols for interstellar relations, and most importantly, the confidence that humans could adapt and survive in a galaxy full of challenges. The accidental explorers had become successful ambassadors, proving that sometimes the best discoveries come from the most unexpected journeys. 6 months later, when the Liberty Dawn finally entered Earth's solar system, Morrison knew that humanity would never be the same. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but it was also full of opportunities for those brave and clever enough to seize them. The age of human expansion among the stars was about to begin, and it would be guided by the tactical principles and diplomatic wisdom learned in the service of an alien empire that had become humanity's first galactic ally.